Back to the Future is the timeless tale of racing through history, but there's one journey even a time machine can't escape: aging. Some cast members have changed so drastically that fans barely recognize them, while others carry the heavy scars of illness and a brutal industry. Now, we will look back at the actors who shaped this legend and uncover the legacies time left behind. Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. Marty McFly, the heartbeat of Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Michael J. Fox. At just 24 years old, he carried the film's energy, humor, and emotional core with a natural ease that hid how stretched and fragile he already was behind the scenes. That role would become both a triumph and a quiet tragedy. Born on June 9, 1961, in Edmonton, Alberta, Michael Andrew Fox faced extreme professional pressure long before illness entered his life. His biggest career struggle was a brutally demanding schedule, filming Family Ties from morning to late afternoon, then racing across town to shoot Back to the Future until past 2 a.m. This punishing routine lasted months and pushed him to physical collapse. In that time, films like Midnight Madness and Class of 1984 failed to open doors, and Fox teetered on the edge financially before Family Ties saved his career. Then the unthinkable arrived. In 1991, at just 30, Fox received the diagnosis that would shadow him forever: early-onset Parkinson's disease. Tremors disrupted his work, stiffness turned movements unpredictable, and the emotional weight of hiding symptoms exhausted him far more than the cameras ever did. Still, he fought through it, delivering acclaimed performances in Spin City and The Good Wife. Now, Fox is 64 years old, still alive, still carrying the burden of a disease that reshaped every part of his existence. He continues writing, appearing when he can, and guiding the Michael J. Fox Foundation with unwavering resolve. His net worth, about $65 million, stands as a testament to a man who turned suffering into purpose and refused to let time silence him. Christopher Lloyd as Dr. Emmett Brown. Dr. Emmett Brown, the eccentric architect of time travel in Back to the Future, 1985, was brought to the screen by Christopher Lloyd. He was 47 years old when he stepped into the role, shaping the film's emotional heartbeat with a mix of chaos and fragile brilliance. It was the moment his long struggle with obscurity finally cracked open. Born on October 22, 1938, in Stamford, Connecticut, Christopher Allen Lloyd endured a career defined more by setbacks than success through his first 2 decades in acting. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, he was repeatedly typecast as too odd, losing dozens of roles to more conventional-looking actors. He spent years trapped in off-Broadway cycles where productions closed early, including Red, White, and Maddox and Total Eclipse, leaving him unemployed for months at a time. His cinematic debut in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest brought attention, but it did not translate into steady work. As time passed, the emotional strain of these constant rejections left its mark. Lloyd battled recurring waves of anxiety and occasional depression, struggling internally. His mind remained sharp, but decades of uncertainty had carved deep scars. Today, Christopher Lloyd, now 87, remains alive, moving carefully but still carrying the spark that first electrified Doc Brown. He appears when able, grateful for fans who kept his legacy alive long after he feared it might fade. His net worth of around $50 million exists not as luxury, but as the unlikely proof that a man once considered too strange ultimately outlasted everyone who doubted him. Lea Thompson as Lorraine Baines. Lorraine Baines, the shy yet determined 1950s teenager in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Lea Thompson. She was 24 years old when she stepped into a role that demanded comedy, vulnerability, and the ability to anchor the film's emotional tension. Behind that role, she had already fought to keep her place in Hollywood. Born on May 31, 1961, in Rochester, Minnesota, Lee Catherine Thompson entered the industry facing pressures far harsher than audiences realized. In the early 1980s, she was repeatedly told her body didn't meet Hollywood's beauty standards, pushed to lose extreme amounts of weight, and urged to change her image or risk never being cast again. After Back to the Future, she confronted another wall. Studios refused to give her leading roles, labeling her too wholesome, forcing her to turn toward television and stage work despite wanting a strong film career. At that difficult time, the physical demands of her roles left marks of their own. Years of dance training, stunts, and long shooting days led to lingering joint injuries, and she admitted that pain sometimes followed her from set to set. Still, she delivered memorable performances across decades, including the cult film Howard the Duck and her Golden Globe-nominated work in Caroline in the City. Now, Lea Thompson is 64 years old and still active, directing, acting, and mentoring younger performers who face the same pressures she once endured alone. The years have changed her appearance, surprising many fans, but age has only made her voice and craft stronger. Her estimated net worth of $14 million reflects her survival. Crispin Glover as George McFly. George McFly, the timid, soft-spoken father whose courage reshapes the timeline in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Crispin Glover. He was only 21 years old when he stepped into the role, giving the character an unforgettable strangeness that felt both fragile and electric. But the world behind the camera was far more turbulent than the one his character lived in. Born on April 20th, 1964 in New York City, Crispin Hellion Glover faced a career filled with battles few actors his age had ever endured. After Back to the Future, he entered one of the most notorious Hollywood disputes of the decade. He sued Universal for using an artificial likeness of him in Part 2 without consent. The lawsuit, though groundbreaking, made him a target. Studios saw him as difficult, and the fallout led to years of quiet blacklisting. His eccentric acting style caused him to lose major studio roles, pushing him toward independent filmmaking when Hollywood refused to take the risk. The emotional toll of isolation began to surface in his private reflections. He openly admitted to periods of depression intensified by the industry's rejection and the solitude of his fiercely independent path. Even while dealing with that weight, he delivered striking performances in River's Edge and Charlie's Angels. Now, Glover is 61 years old and still carrying the same eccentric aura that once unsettled and fascinated the world. He focuses on touring his independent films, writing and creating art far from the studio system that once pushed him aside. His net worth, $6 million, reflects a man who survived through self-made projects and whose legacy remains defiantly his own. Thomas F. Wilson as Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen, the towering, volatile antagonist in Back to the Future, 1985, was embodied by Thomas F. Wilson. He was 26 years old when he created one of cinema's most iconic bullies, a character so memorable that it would shape the rest of his career in ways both unexpected and painful. What audiences laughed at, Wilson later carried as a burden. Born on April 15, 1959 in Philadelphia, Thomas Francis Wilson Jr. entered Hollywood with dreams of becoming a versatile character actor. Instead, he faced a harsh career obstacle: immediate and relentless typecasting. Work became sporadic, and he even endured a quiet financial crisis in the mid-1990s when acting jobs slowed so drastically that he considered quitting the industry entirely. Even his acclaimed performances in Freaks and Geeks and Wing Commander barely shifted Hollywood's narrow view of him. Besides, the psychological impact of fame was its own kind of wound. Years of being cornered by fans asking the same repetitive questions about Biff fueled his anxiety, pushing him to the point where he printed a card just to avoid the constant interrogation. Still, he poured his talents into voice acting, in projects like SpongeBob SquarePants and The Patrick Star Show, and into films such as The Heat. Now, Wilson is 66 years old and still creating, through art, stand-up comedy, music, and voice work. With a net worth of around $4 million, he stands as a man who weathered Hollywood's narrow expectations and rebuilt a career on his own terms, long after the world tried to trap him in the past. James Tolkan as Mr. Strickland. Mr. Strickland, the stern, sharp-tongued disciplinarian of Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by James Tolkan. He was 54 years old when he brought the character to life, commanding every scene with a presence that felt unshakable. Off-screen, however, his journey was marked by struggles far quieter and far heavier. Born on June 20th, 1931, in Calumet, Michigan, James Stewart Tolkan began his career painfully late by Hollywood standards. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, he survived on a patchwork of small roles, constantly typecast as strict authority figures because of his intense features and clipped delivery. While memorable, these roles trapped him, limiting opportunities and causing years of financial instability. Even after appearing in major films like Serpico and Prince of the City, he remained overshadowed, waiting for the role that would finally define him. As time went by, age itself became his greatest barrier. By the time his career gained momentum, with performances in Top Gun and Masters of the Universe, the physical demands of long shoots wore him down. His stamina weakened, his energy faded, and he began accepting fewer roles simply because his body no longer cooperated the way it once did. Today, James Tolkan is 94 years old, moving through the world with the slow fragility of a man who has seen nearly a century pass. He lives quietly, occasionally engaging with fans, but largely retired from the industry that gave him both hardship and meaning. His net worth, around $5 million, stands as a modest but remarkable testament to a long, difficult, and deeply resilient career. Claudia Wells as Jennifer Parker. Jennifer Parker, Marty McFly's kind, loyal girlfriend in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Claudia Wells. She was just 19 years old when she stepped into the role, bringing a gentle charm that made Jennifer an anchor in Marty's chaotic world. But her sudden disappearance from the sequels hid a deeper heartbreak. Born on July 5, 1966, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Claudia Grace Wells began performing young, appearing in operas and television before her teens. But barely after breaking into film, her career collided with devastating personal circumstances: her mother's cancer diagnosis. Hollywood was just beginning to open its doors to her, with roles in Fast Times and Off the Rack. Yet she was forced to walk away at the height of her momentum. Casting directors moved on, and opportunities vanished while she stayed home as a caregiver. As a result, the emotional strain of caring for a dying parent left deep, lingering effects. She has spoken openly about the anxiety and grief that followed her mother's death, feelings that made it difficult for her to return to acting for many years. When she finally resurfaced in independent films and returned to voice Jennifer Parker in Back to the Future, The Game, it was less a comeback and more a quiet reclaiming of a part of her life she once thought was gone forever. Today, Wells is 59 years old, dividing her time between selective acting projects and running her longtime clothing boutique in Los Angeles. Her net worth, around $3 million, comes from years of business work rather than Hollywood stardom. Frances Lee McCain as Stella Baines. Stella Baines, the protective, soft-spoken mother in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Frances Lee McCain. She was 41 years old when she stepped into the role, grounding the film's chaos with a warmth and steadiness only she could deliver. Yet her career behind the scenes was far less stable. Born on July 28, 1944, in York, Pennsylvania, Frances Lee McCain spent years fighting for visibility in an industry that offered her few chances. After early success in theater, she struggled to secure substantial film roles, often cast as the mother or the neighbor, no matter how much range she showed. By the mid-1980s, these limitations pushed her away from Hollywood and back into stage work. Even with memorable turns in Gremlins and Footloose, the frustration of being overlooked left a lasting mark. Though she never faced major physical illness, McCain has spoken quietly about the toll of aging out of Hollywood's narrow expectations and how the emotional strain of being limited to supporting roles weighed on her throughout her career. Instead of stepping back, she turned toward theater, continuing to work in productions long after the cameras shifted to younger faces. Today, McCain is 81 years old. Her appearance changed by time, but her presence unmistakably the same. She continues to involve herself in theater projects and community arts work, choosing paths where she is valued rather than confined. Her net worth, around $1.5 million, reflects a career built not on stardom but on persistence, resilience, and a quiet devotion to her craft. Mark McClure as Dave McFly. Dave McFly, the earnest, good-natured older brother in Back to the Future, 1985, was performed by Mark McClure. He was 28 years old when he stepped into the role, shaping Dave as a quiet contrast to Marty's restless energy. But behind that light-hearted presence was an actor wrestling with a career far more complicated than the character he played. Born March 31, 1957, in San Mateo, California, McClure found early momentum in films like Freaky Friday and I Wanna Hold Your Hand, but Hollywood quickly placed him into a narrow box. After Superman, where he became iconic as Jimmy Olsen, he discovered that studios saw him only as the harmless sidekick. Roles grew repetitive, auditions dried up, and he often felt invisible despite appearing in some of the biggest franchises of the era. Even when reunited with Robert Zemeckis on Used Cars, the shadow of typecasting followed him everywhere, creating a strain that lingered through the decades. He tried to stay afloat through small television parts on Happy Days, Hunter, and Cold Case, yet the gap between where he stood and where he dreamed of being only widened. His occasional comebacks, such as Superman-related roles in Smallville and Justice League, became reminders of how difficult it was to escape the roles that once made him famous. Now, McClure is 68 years old, still alive, still attending conventions, still meeting fans who remember what Hollywood often forgot. His net worth, about $2 million, reflects a lifetime of steady but underappreciated work. Casey Siemaszko as 3D, the quiet but sharp-eyed member of Biff's gang in Back to the Future, 1985, was brought to life by Casey Siemaszko. He was 24 years old when he stepped into the neon-shaded role, slipping into Hill Valley's chaos with a presence that was small but unforgettable. Yet behind that brief appearance was a young actor walking toward a far more difficult future than audiences ever realized. Born March 17, 1961, in Chicago, Siemaszko carried the weight of a family history marked by survival and struggle. His father, a Polish resistance fighter and concentration camp survivor, shaped a home where discipline and perseverance overshadowed everything else. When Casey entered Hollywood after graduating from the Goodman School of Drama, he found the industry far less welcoming than the stage he'd trained for. Despite strong turns in Stand By Me, 3 O'Clock High, and Young Guns, casting directors repeatedly pushed him aside, seeing him as too quiet, too soft, too hard to place. By his 30s, that strain transformed into something quieter and more painful. He often spoke about the exhaustion of constantly restarting, new auditions, new promises, new disappointments that felt like echoes of the last. Even his strong performances in ensemble films couldn't secure the stability he hoped for. Today, Siemaszko is 64 years old, living a humble life away from the frenzy of Los Angeles. His net worth of about $1 million reflects a career of resilience rather than fame. And though his time in the spotlight was brief, fans still remember the man behind the 3D glasses. Harry Waters Jr. as Marvin Berry. Marvin Berry, the soulful musician whose performance helps spark one of cinema's most memorable moments, was portrayed by Harry Waters Jr. in Back to the Future, 1985. He was 32 years old when he brought Marvin to life, leaving fans with a voice and presence that would echo long after his brief screen time ended. Yet the real story of his career was not the fame he gained, but the weight he carried behind it. Born April 13, 1953, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Waters built his foundation on the stage long before Hollywood noticed him. But the success of Back to the Future led to a strange dilemma. The industry loved his voice, but not enough to offer him the roles he hoped for. Instead, he found himself navigating a career full of pauses, teaching jobs, and the ongoing pressure to choose between artistic work and financial stability. His acclaimed performance in Angels in America revealed his depth, yet roles of that caliber remained painfully rare. However, balancing stage commitments, teaching responsibilities, and creative collaborations pushed him to exhaustion many times. Still, he kept moving forward, appearing in films like What Lies Beneath and directing theater projects across the country, using his craft to stay connected to the world that often kept him at its margins. In 2025, Waters is 72 years old, still alive, serving at Macalester College while preparing for retirement after decades of mentoring young performers. His net worth, around $1 million, reflects a career built less on Hollywood fame and more on resilience, heart, and the belief that art can still matter even when the spotlight fades. J.J. Cohen as Skinhead, the volatile, sharp-tongued member of Biff's gang in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by J.J. Cohen. He was only 20 years old when he took on the role, embodying the menace and swagger that helped define Hill Valley's dangerous edges. Few knew then that his early promise in the franchise would collide with one of the cruelest turns a young actor can face, being almost chosen for greatness, only to lose it by inches. Born June 22, 1965, Cohen entered Hollywood with momentum, landing roles in Paradise Motel, Secret Admirer, Fire with Fire, and later, Almost Famous. But the moment that altered everything came before Back to the Future even began filming. He was originally a finalist to play Biff Tannen. And then, with Eric Stoltz cast as Marty, the producers decided Cohen simply didn't look intimidating enough. That single decision reshaped his entire trajectory. Instead of a career-defining role, he was pushed into supporting parts. The emotional toll lingered for years, though he continued to act, appearing in films like 976 EVIL and shows like Baywatch and Providence. Cohen felt the sting of being typecast, sidelined, and forgotten by an industry he'd given everything to. The silence between jobs grew longer, and eventually he walked away from acting entirely, choosing business over the heartbreak of waiting for a call that never came. Today, Cohen is 60 years old, living a quieter life far removed from the lights that once defined him. His net worth of around $500,000 reflects not failure, but survival. Donald Fullilove as Goldie Wilson. Goldie Wilson, the optimistic diner worker who dreams of becoming mayor in Back to the Future, 1985, was portrayed by Donald Fullilove. He was 27 years old when he stepped into the role, turning a small part into a line fans still quote decades later. Yet the real story behind that bright smile carried far more struggle than audiences ever knew. Born May 16, 1958, in Dallas, Texas, Fullilove grew up chasing opportunity while battling the limits Hollywood placed on him. After voicing young Michael Jackson on Jackson 5-5, he tried to build a stable acting career, only to be pushed repeatedly toward voice work because studios refused to cast him beyond the margins. Even as he contributed to major films like Mulan, Monsters, Inc., and Up, the pressure of surviving in the Hollywood industry became a painful burden he carried for years. As a result, Fullilove endured the exhaustion of a career shaped by scarcity rather than choice. Opportunities arrived inconsistently, forcing him to balance part-time voice gigs with the fear of disappearing from the industry entirely. His role in Up reminded fans of his talent, but for him, it underscored how the path forward had become smaller and heavier with time. Now, Fully Love is 67 years old, still alive, still working in voice acting where he finds steady ground at last. His net worth, about $1 million, reflects decades of persistence rather than fame. Wendy Jo Sperber as Linda McFly. Linda McFly, Marty's high-spirited sister in Back to the Future, 1985, was brought to life by Wendy Jo Sperber. She was 27 years old when she played the role, filling the McFly household with warmth and humor. But the light she brought to the screen grew tragically dim in the years that followed. Born September 15, 1958, in Hollywood, Sperber broke into acting with fierce energy, earning early praise for I Wanna Hold Your Hand and later for her comedic brilliance on Bosom Buddies. Yet behind the laughter were battles with confidence, typecasting, and the anxiety of being seen only as the funny best friend. Hollywood often overlooked her depth, leaving her fighting to protect a career that never gave her the chances she deserved. Her life changed forever in 1997 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. What began as a private struggle became a 9-year war marked by radiation, remission, metastasis, and unimaginable pain. Even as the disease spread, she refused to retreat, working on shows like Will and Grace while founding the We Spark Cancer Support Center, offering others the comfort she often had to face without. Sadly, on November 29, 2005, Sperber died at age 47. Passing away at home after her long, devastating battle with cancer. She left behind 2 children, a legacy of kindness, and a net worth of about $1 million. So that is all today's video. Which Back to the Future actor's story surprised you the most, and whose journey would you like us to explore next? If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the video so more fans can uncover these hidden stories. Your support keeps these memories alive. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Goodbye.